Congresswoman Bush. I now recognize myself for 5 questions, or for 5 minutes. Director Peters, thank you so much for being with us here today. I'd like to pick up right where you left off with Congresswoman Bush on the subject of special housing units. President Biden's executive order titled Advancing Effective, Accountable Policing and Criminal Justice Practices touched on those special housing units and asked that you ensure that that type of housing is used rarely, applied fairly, and subject to reasonable constraints. I very much appreciate your prior answer indicating how much thought and study you are giving to the use of special housing units, when and how they are applied, but also wanted to note that we hear many correctional officers, including representatives from the Council of Prison Locals, have endorsed the continuing use of special housing units as an essential tool for officer safety. Could you please speak a little more to your point about finding an alternative tool that if we are to try to reduce or get closer to eliminating special housing units, the necessity to have an alternative tool for those corrections officers available?
Thank you, Congresswoman. That's very important to me. Their safety and security is top of mind every day as I do this work. I think one of the data points that I'll take a deeper dive on is those individuals who are in special housing who are there because they're in protective custody status. So either because they've asked to be in the special housing unit because they don't feel safe, or we've made an intelligence determination that they wouldn't be safe in the general population. And so that's a large portion of our special housing unit. And so I think one of the recommendations that I'll likely dive into more next week with my executive team is this notion of creating more safe and humane environments inside the prisons so that those individuals in protective custody status feel more comfortable in our general population units. And our reintegration units do just that, help these individuals step down from that higher level of restrictive housing in a safe way, safe for them and safe for our officers. And so I think that's a great model to advance this notion and these ideas.
Thank you. I'd also like to touch on a new effort to utilize licensed counselors in the Employee Assistance Program as part of your overall wellness and retention program for correctional officers. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Have these changes been implemented? Have you gotten any feedback on how that program is going?
Thank you. So employee wellness is incredibly important to me. As you know, the data points are really tough in law enforcement, specifically in corrections. And we've talked about overtime and augmentation and the impact there as well. So we have a lot of work to do. But we did change 3 of our policies this year. One of them included requiring that those counselors providing that employee assistance program counseling be certified. That has taken place. And it's our hopes that that higher level certification will give a more meaningful session for those who have the courage to seek it.
Now, as we're nearing the end of our hearing time, so I'd also like to ask you if there is something that you were hoping to share with us today that you haven't already touched on, and whether there is anything that we as Congress can be doing to further support you in your mission.
Thank you, Congresswoman. So I think the short answer to that is always resources. The conversation we had earlier with your colleagues around being able to increase pay for our frontline workers would be incredibly helpful as we try to retain the ones we have and get the ones in the front door that we want. Training, we haven't talked about training yet today. One of the things that surprised me when I took this role was the small amount of training that our employees receive on the front end. They get 3 weeks in the classroom and 3 weeks on the job. The data would suggest that the average onboarding for law enforcement in this country is actually 21 weeks, so that's much shorter than that. My dream would be to have a training academy where we're able to train these individuals from recruitment to retirement and everything in between. And so I appreciate your support and appreciate the question very much. Thank you.
And on the subject of recruitment and retention, you mentioned that you're working very hard on that and focused in part on recruiting and retaining by enhancing the Bureau of Prisons image. Could you tell us, in your view, what image is the Bureau of Prisons portraying and what would you like for it to be?
Yes, so I think we've done a lot of work on this issue, and we're really looking for public safety-minded individuals who want to come and change hearts and minds, not that traditional, stereotypical view of a correctional professional that the movies or TV might portray, but we have hard-working professionals who engage in really meaningful work, keeping our prisons safe, but we ask them to do such complex work. They're not standing in the corner looking over people. They're engaging in conversations and helping them get into that programming, that treatment, and that education. So for anyone who is listening to this hearing today, the Federal Bureau of Prisons is hiring, and we're looking for those right people to come in and really do heroes work day in and day out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.